Chapter 4, the historical influence of parents. And this one's quite interesting, and it uses a term, and again, to me, it's agenda-driven. But the first 5 people we're going to introduce you to are what are known as social thinkers, and that's actually the term they use. And so if you get a chance, I really want you to spend some time reading this, and then we'll look at the phases, the historical influences as they occurred by the different eras, the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, and now the 21st century. And I'm going to ask you all to participate in this at different points, so I'll be looking for that in the lecture. Chapter 4, Historical Perspectives of Parent Involvement. So Chapter 4, this parent involvement and historical overview, and here again is Dr. Rojas Cortez. Learning about the past gives us the opportunity to understand the future. And really that's the essence of any history lesson, of why we study history. And here's these social thinkers that I talked about. And we'll just look at those one by one here, and then some of the influences. So here's the first one, this Amos Comenius. You can see a long time ago, and he has a couple things here. First of all, this Moravian Brethren, and you bring in one line what that means here in your notes. You can stop this and do this. There's a couple other here, and then wrote this Dicta Magna, the School of Infancy, and this Orbis Pictus. And I want one line brought into the notes about each of those things, that his involvement, his things, why that's in here. There's some of this in the textbook that you can consult, but I want you to at least bring me in one line of each of those, what the heck that has to do with this, why we're talking about this with him. And then he believed in this basic goodness of each child. And again, you look at this a long time ago, allows families to work with young children and understand that they can mold their child's behavior through guidance and discipline. And that's really what we still function from today, right? At least that's what we try and do here. Don't you think we can mold a child's behavior through discipline, guidance and discipline? So he was big on this infant education, or this funds of knowledge that we talked about in Chapter 1. And I will call it this passing along. Passing along this information. Right? This was really of the beginning of child training and parent training. Okay, and then here's Locke, this tabula rasa, the idea that child's mind is born as a blank slate, and that was his thing, that it's just empty, ready to learn. A little bit, this is going to be pushed back against a little bit later on, and again, if you look at this time era, it was a time, but that's when he believed that you could mold them into anything you wanted to. It was really up to that. Family and teacher provide valuable experiences and optimum environment for that child to thrive, and we would agree with that would be the thing. You bring this in. You tell me about this. Give me some information under Locke about this here in the notes. Not too much, a couple lines. Just look it up in the book, see what it's about. And then Rousseau. Rousseau again is 17th century guy. He was in this. He was for this social contract. Described the government. Described government through consent and contract with its subject expressing desire for freedom. What does that mean? Very interesting thing here. He had this: Emile urged mothers to cultivate or teach their children, emphasizing the parental role in this. Can I have you ask you to do this too? I want you to look this up, The Social Contract of 1762 by Rousseau. And here's a one-liner, but give me one more line about the origin of that. So you've got a couple things to do here, and then this Emile, and then here's your Pestalozzi, Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi. It's kind of a cool name, really. Made it to be quite. He's the father of parent education. He believed in that natural goodness of children that we saw before, and is based on concrete teaching. Is based on these concrete objects, group instruction. What's group instruction? School, correct. And cooperation among students and self-activities. Use manipulatives through tangible objects. Child's day also includes recreation time, known as recess. snacks and meals. How Gertrude teaches her children and emphasizes the importance of the mother and including teaching methods for parents. And again, will you look this up and tell me about this book, about this theory? So that's another thing you bring in your notes, please. Stop this, and when I tell you these things, just go ahead and stop, and you can do them right now, and just jot a few notes, just Google them. And Froebel, Frederick Wilhelm Froebel, this is from your Foundations of Ed class, is considered the father of education. And he had developed this curriculum for kindergarten. Said that early childhood was important, getting them ready for school. And he wanted it age appropriate, development appropriate. Emphasized the importance of mother in development. And it's interesting in our kindergartens today that they're not more of a part of it. Mother play and nursery songs, finger plays, stuff like that was big with him. Then this historical influence on parent education involvement. Well, early in the 20th century, like in the 60s, 70s, now this is the eras that we're going to study. First of all, the Love and Freedom had this White House conference on the care of dependent children. And again, you know my attitude here that the federal government, you think that the federal government is going to talk about how to take care of children. It's just so interesting to me that the feds would get involved in this, that it wouldn't come down to more of a local level. And then from 1910 to 30 was the emphasis on a strict scheduling and discipline. And some of that is carried through today. This infant care parent education book published. Expect obedience, ignore temper tantrums, restrict physical handling. Some of that was debunked, but again, if you get back here, so it's handled by the federal government, this is some of the things you get. And then also in this area, the University of Chicago Parent Cooperative formed in 1916, followed by nursery school traditions established in England. Okay, so you tell me, again, bring a little something in here in the notes about the University of Chicago Parent Cooperative. Okay, and tell what that was about here. This is what they did, but tell how that came to be, please. In the early 20th century, from 20 to 50 focused on character formation, period of indulgence and reckless youth, to shift toward behavior modification through environmental conditioning, behavioralism, which a lot of us still talk about today, and also learning by doing theories that Dewey had. And parent group membership increased dramatically. The PTA took off, parent-teacher associations. And then the 30s, the Great Depression changed everything. Anybody seen the movie The Waltons? Still in syndication today. A movie from the 70s, but it was about the 30s. Difficult providing for the families. This again, the feds get involved in a White House conference on child health and protection. Work Progress Administration, so this the government tried to provide jobs, offered forum for mothers to learn about home management. And the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, work relief wages for unemployed teachers and others to form nursery schools. And why? To help try and boost the thing with children, and of course it created jobs. And this was the government's, some say now looking back that it prolonged the Depression because of all the money that was spent by the federal government trying to bring us out of the recession. And despite the Depression times, high levels of parent involvement received mass media, radio, magazines, bulletins, etc. Again, it was all part of the federal government thing. What do we have these people do? We have them get involved in creating jobs by this. Spent tons of tax dollars on it. And then the 40s, the realization that no one answered work for all situations, so it's shift away from that strict thinking. A new goal, emotionally healthy child, so we start worrying about the emotional development. Spock was the first one, the common sense book to baby and child care, advised parents to enjoy their children and the role of parent. Reduction in parent education offerings because of how much money it take. Unlike the 30s and 40s, now this was real work that people had to. A lot of the women went to work because so many men were involved in war, and so the women had to go to the plants and stuff. And so that why we had reduction in this. Again, I'm going to ask you to look up Benjamin Spock, the Common Sense book for baby and child care. and bring that in here and tell me a little bit about Benjamin Spock. And I would look for this here, a paragraph on the Common Sense Book of Baby and Child Care. Okay. In the 50s, renewed emphasis on family life. Yes, that's when everybody had a one-car garage. The mother was home. We came out of the war, so the mothers could return home to raise the children. The fathers went to work, whether it was the factory or the office, and that was a kind of a golden era. Your Child from 6 to 12 book on homeschool relations by James Himes. Again, would you look this up, please? And put two paragraphs here about that. Erickson's Childhood and Society, that was another one. I would like you to look up here, and there's some information in the textbook about this. And here was his stages. And nothing new there. But that was his. And when I say, tell me something about this, why did he write it? Who was it for? Things like that in a lot of these. What was it about? Why was it here? Okay. Then this great social change. The 60s. Father involvement, more parent education available. This was the beginning of what they called the War on Poverty. Social welfare programs on education and health care. Head Start created in 65. Who was this for? For the poor. And then Elementary and Secondary Education Act was the first federal legislation piece for education. And what's interesting to me is there's absolutely nothing whatsoever accounted for in the Constitution dealing with education. Some of us whiny people would say, why would the federal government have any legislation about education? Because they have no power whatsoever. The Constitution gave them absolutely no mention whatsoever of education. So very interesting. And then the Civil Rights Acts of 65. And here's my thing. Again, this is because I'm old. But this War on Poverty, we started this in the 1960s. So we now are 50 years of this War on Poverty, and it's worse than ever. More poverty than ever. Okay, here's what a whiny old white guy would say is then apparently the efforts the federal government have employed were never necessary. I can't imagine that our poverty would be any worse had the federal government never got involved. I don't get to change that. You don't get to change that. Just my observation. But then talks about the federal government programs trying to change society. Okay, 60s. Some would say the 60s were the beginning of the breakdown of the family, because it was where the women really went to the workforce. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be in the workforce. I'm saying it was the beginning of the change of the family structure in the 60s. Then the 70s was the era of advocacy, the rise, parents advocating for their children and questioning the programs. This was the special child. So let me ask you a couple questions here I want you to put in here. What was the public law that was enacted, the first public law ever for the special child? What was that public law called? What was the number? Every law has a number. So you give me the number of that federal law, and you tell me what year, right here. And you make, every time I ask you to do this, will you turn them red so that I can know that you found it, so I don't have to hunt it out of this other stuff? You turn it red. What was the law number, and what year was the beginning of federal legislation for special children in the 70s? And this was busing, and busing doesn't mean the school bus to school. It meant this radical, it says racial, I'm going to call it radical integration of, take the kids from the black school, take half of those and put them on a bus and make them travel across town for an hour, so they go to the white school, and take half the kids from the white school, put them on the bus and make them travel a half hour to the black school, so we could say we're integrated. It was by far the most silly, foolish thing that the government ever did in our schools, but that was what they did. It was this radical, this word is racial, and I'm saying radical integration. More showing importance of home environment in early childhood in the 70s. Yes, and remember it went back to the Head Start program. Then the 80s, financial pressure, drugs, violence, health care, nutrition, lack of child care. And again, the child care thing came because more and more and more women in the workforce. And so this became a huge issue that was never before around. Health care too, because the mothers weren't there to do some of that they used to do, those traditional things. And food changed, and again, why? Because of the absence of the mother in the home. So a lot of these came into play before this. And the other thing that one guy would write, or some would write about this, is this also because not only more absence of parents in raising them, but more affluency, meaning money, more affluency, money. So because of that, we have, again, more kids coming home, latchkey kids. We had more teenage pregnancy, high number of single mothers. These two, of course, are connected. And then more parent education, fear of public interference in the family. Yeah, kind of a reaction to the federal government telling you how to raise your kids. And then we had the first of the Family and Parental Leave Act was defeated, and eventually was passed, of course. And then Focus on the Family, and that's not James Dobson's Focus on the Family. This is in the 90s view, shift from importance of parental involvement to family involvement. Again, here, very interesting that the federal government is going to get involved again. They're going to fix this. Title I, Even Start, Goals 2000, resource centers. Here's what I want you to do again. You stop this and you tell me something about Title I, Even Start, and Goals 2000 standards from each of this. And again, some of this is in the textbook, but I want you to put a sentence or a paragraph on each of these in here in the notes right here, and then come back. And the increased popularity of homeschooling, and now today, of course, it's escalating at a rapid rate because of people's displeasure with the public school systems. And here's the Family and Medical Leave Act passed, and that says that like a new mom could have up to 12 weeks paid while they have their children, which, and temporary assistance, again, more federal involvement in the poor. And this is what you would think, is that it's not enough, but the more they did, the more poor people had. And I'm just saying, think about this. If the more we do, the more people we have that are poor. Sorry. And then this No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. Let me, again, you give me 1 or 2 lines of what this meant. It's in the textbook. You bring that out. What does this mean? Look this up, Google it something, and put it right here in red what No Child Left Behind Act was. This is a piece of legislation that actually brought death threats to the President of the United States at the time. But what was it that that angered teachers mostly? Then parent education offered through the Department of Ed. And again, the federal government, this is U.S., means the feds will educate the parents. Very interesting to me. I can't get my head around that. And then revise this Family and Medical Leave Act to allow for temporary unemployment benefits. Yeah, while you had your family. And the growing use of technology in the schools. By 2008, all computers with internet access. And like I said, this is 2008. They're quoting this. I'm going to say, look at the future. Let's get to 2018 and see how different technology looks. Okay, so those are the areas that we're going to look at here. Chapter 4.